I built an 8-figure SEO agency with over 100 staff in Australia. But now I'm starting from scratch in America with no team, no clients. Welcome to Prestige Mode. In a second, I'll show you why I picked one of the toughest markets on earth and what I messed up first. So what is Prestige Mode? Basically, I wanted to do this to document my journey going from $0 to $10 million, which is kind of the goal for this video series. Keeping it raw, keeping it real. The reason I love Prestige Mode is it's like in Call of Duty, when you get to the max level, you can prestige, keeping some of your items, but unlocking new things. But you have to start from scratch and unlock all your guns and everything again, which is kind of how I feel over here with no team, no clients. So to start off, it kind of is, why did we pick the US? So we started in Australia 10 years ago. We did the UK 5 years ago, and it makes sense to look at the cap of the size of these markets. So in Australia, we're the largest by a wide margin now. In the US, the market size is literally 15 times the size of Australia. So if we're doing 20 mil in Australia, we could be doing 300 mil. That was some quick math. So it's just a lot larger of a market. The caliber of talent and the opportunity is therefore bigger. So that's why I chose the US. But as a classic Aussie, I looked at 2 cities, LA and New York. That's basically what I thought of America. I thought those 2 cities. So I started out by scoping out LA. And sorry to anyone that lives in LA, I thought it was gonna be really hard to build a business in LA. I thought there was a lot of ego in the talent there, and we kind of wanna hire wholesome nerds. And throughout the journey in Australia, I've learned that you really do want moldable, wholesome nerds, and that's kind of the archetype of who we hire. In LA, I really thought, to be honest, that was gonna be a big challenge. So I thought the cost of living, all the other stuff, man, LA's not gonna work. So I went to option 2, New York City. Incredible place, super smart individuals, crazy expensive. I looked at the office space and I thought, like, I literally walked in and they quoted me, and I thought that they were quoting me for a year, but that was just a month of office space. And then I looked at the talent, and while really good, I thought we would get stuck at about 10 people in New York because we would be capped on what we're able to charge versus acquire talent. So I gave up on the US. I kind of really started winding it down. But then a buddy reached out and said, have you looked at the South? I'm like, what? The South? Like, and I was thinking cowboys and guns. But when I looked at it, I looked at the emergence of cities like Charlotte, Nashville, Atlanta, and that began that next journey of scoping out some of these cities that I'd never heard of in Australia. So I started going to these other cities. I went to Charlotte and I was shocked. I was really impressed by the caliber of talent there and the vibe. It feels growing. Like all these places, Nashville, Charlotte, Austin, all these places I visited. But the one that really stood out to me was Atlanta. Now, Atlanta stood out because there's a lot of like marketing technology already happening there, MailChimp. It feels like a emerging city, a lot of people moving from New York there. And so that's how I ended up setting up. And I found this great spot in Atlanta called the Beltline, and I fell in love with it. It's basically this huge walking strip with restaurants and bars and all these cool kind of offices there. So that was how I settled on Atlanta. And the other reason, the more logical reason, is the talent is relatively affordable and still very smart, and you can train them to be exactly how you want, which I know we're gonna have to do a lot of anyway. So settled on Atlanta, and to be honest, I thought the rest of it would be fairly easy. You know, setting up business, visa stuff. I could not have been further from the truth, right? This has been a massive block and still is a massive block as of recording right now. Setting up the LLC, just a company structure, cost thousands of dollars. And because I didn't have a social security number, I had to go all through these different like whirly paths just to get to something set up. You know, there were several times where I thought like, this isn't even gonna happen. But finally, got that LLC set up, and then the whole visa thing. I mean, I'm already $25,000 in the hole of just getting a visa, going through what's called an L1A visa process. And this when you're by yourself in the States going through these things, it's really tough, especially going through the border, going through all these things. Like I couldn't rent a place properly, like I couldn't get a car. All these things in a new country, in a new place where I knew nobody is really hard. It's really lonely. And especially coming from Australia, where I'm so lucky to have a big team that's wrapped around me and supporting me, it was really jarring. And it really did feel like that prestige mode feeling of like, whoa, I'm actually starting again. Partnered with the fact that when I got there, mission number one was to get clients. Now, I don't know, I just kind of thought, I knew that doing the UK, that a lot of it is going to be new ground, but nothing that we'd done in Australia seemed to matter to people in the US, right? Whether we're working with big brands or how many millions in revenue or how big our team was, the question was always, so how many people do you have in the US? And that answer, of course, was just me. So trying to build that narrative about why they should hire StudioHawk, or me in this case, was really hard. So off I went to a bunch of different networking events. So I went to about 15, 20 different events all over the world, some in Barcelona, some all over the place, Dubai, to start getting connected in with the people from the US that I needed to speak to. So I hadn't been networking for a long time, and I forget how awkward it is when you're in a room full of people, you don't know anyone, and you have to do the super forced, awkward, cringy thing of like inserting yourself into a group. And I'm not a naturally extroverted guy, and I always like, you have to force yourself to do that. You literally just go up to groups of people and just plant yourself, like midway through their conversation, just smile and nod until they go, oh, hey, who are you? And you just kind of introduce yourself. And it was funny going back to that and doing a lot of that. And especially because I wasn't getting any traction doing that. I was going to all these events, saying hi, meeting some people, and people were super lovely, but you know, people weren't that interested in what I was doing in the SEO space. So it wasn't until I started refining that messaging and just practicing, you know, like going up to different people, knowing what people are interested in, and especially around the AI stuff. So I started introducing and talking more about that. And that's when finally one of the guys there was like, that's super interesting. We're looking for a new SEO company. Would you mind having a chat to my marketing manager? And I was like, absolutely. Like, and he's like, and he's like, what time suits for you? And I'm like, oh, I got a pretty busy day. I was empty. And I'm just like, yeah, let's do 2 p.m. And off I went. I rocked up at their office, Ubered because I couldn't get a bloody car. And I went through the presentation. And luckily that was the catalyst for getting that first client. It was only, I think it was $1,000 US a month, which in Australia would be like a really low package, probably below our entry price in Australia. But in the US, that was such an exciting moment. Getting that first client for me is like the moment the snowball starts rolling down the hill. And that's what started happening. So that triggered the next stage, which is, well, who's coming with me? Who's gonna actually do this stuff? Like, who's gonna be the general manager? Who's gonna run these accounts? And oftentimes in business, I think people overcomplicate it, right? When you're starting a business, there's one thing that is more important than anything else, and that is getting your first sales. And so I had my first sale. Now I needed to figure out how we we're gonna support that. Now I knew we had a big team in Australia and the UK that could help out and spot check, but the time zones are weird, and service in the US is different than how you'd service in those markets. So I picked up a little bit of it, but then I started going through and finding people. And I was super lucky. We had a consultant we were working with for a few years that was working with the global leadership team called Sophie. And I started having chats with her and convincing her to help me out with these US clients. And so she helped me with this work and eventually started helping me as I got more clients, because this client referred us a couple others. She started handling that workload, which was a huge relief to have someone that could potentially pick that up. But that hire and finding who you're gonna bring along on that journey is probably the most critical thing you can do as a founder. And there's always that worry, I don't care who you are, of just, you know, I've done this twice, but am I gonna mess it up the third time? Like when I'm really on display, you know, there's 100 people looking at what I'm doing in the US, and that one hire, if that goes wrong, could be so critical to everything. And I could be coming back from the US with egg on my face, with a bunch of money in the pit. But you just have to trust your gut and forward through. And my gut told me that this person, Sophie, was going to be right for the job. And so far, as of recording this, she's been exceptional. So that kind of brings us to where we are now. As of recording this, kind of 45 days, 2 months later, I've been to about 20, 25 different events now. I've got that first client, which is critical. Got the LLC running, still don't have the visa, working on that part. Hopefully part 2, I've got an update on that. But most importantly, I've got Sophie as a framework that can help deliver that stuff. And hopefully we start driving client referrals as well. In terms of financials, to give you an update on that, so we've done about $2 grand now in actual closed revenue, which, as I say out loud, is we're getting there. But we've got about 20 grand in that pipeline, and annualized, that'll represent about 100 grand in potential pipeline. I feel like I'm selling you guys as investors. But yeah, so hopefully by part 2, when I record part 2, I've got an update on that. We might have started getting more clients, and probably part 2, when I next go to America, we're gonna be starting to build a team and hiring people. So can't wait, subscribe, follow along the journey, and we're gonna get this bad boy to $10 million.